Welcome to Pennsylvania in Focus. I'm Kristen Smith. Joining me today is the Center Square's Pennsylvania reporter, Christina Langell. Christina, earlier this week, you followed Shapiro as he continued his tour of civility, as we've come to call it around here, regarding rising political violence and turning down the temperature of the rhetoric that we use all across the spectrum. And this time he was there with Utah Governor Spencer Cox and journalist Savannah Guthrie to talk more about this at the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C. So tell us more about what they had to say.
It was an interesting event. It was, again, as you said, at the cathedral. So there was a very, somber, sort of serious tone to it, but it was a highly intellectual and academic discussion that led off with a panel of experts who kind of just talked about both political violence and also citizens' roles in civic engagement and things like that. And then, they switched off to the two governors who spoke. They have both kind of been, unwillingly dragged into being point people when it comes to the topic of political violence. In Governor Shapiro's case, of course, he was the victim of an arson attack, a firebombing at the governor's residence in Harrisburg. And Spencer Cox, the governor of Utah, had to navigate the Charlie Kirk assassination in his home state. So the two of them have kind of been brought into this conversation for unfortunate reasons and are now kind of showing up as leaders in, as you said, turning the temperature down. They knew each other prior, both being governors. They're part of the National Governors Association and made each other's acquaintance then. It was a good bipartisan discussion. They don't agree about everything, but they were kind of a real-time demonstration of perhaps people not agreeing without coming to violence.
Right. And you mentioned the panel that took the stage before the governors had their conversation. And some of them had very interesting things to say, including Dr. Yuval Levin, who is from the American Enterprise Institute. Dr. Levin said that, we've always had a history of political violence and that the problem seems to come from the fact that rather than engage with each other, we tend to just isolate ourselves. And I think that's something that you could argue has become significantly more prevalent in the world of social media, where it's very easy to find your people or to stumble into more radicalized environments or bigger echo chambers than you might have necessarily made just out in your daily life. And so that is, what are some of the other observations that these panelists made regarding our current political climate?
Yeah, so what Levin said was honestly just that it's not that we disagree too much. It's that we don't disagree enough out loud in conversation with each other. Instead, we go to these separate camps and don't really engage with people who think differently than us. So, he was advocating for just being responsible to our roles as individuals in a democracy by, doing more than just voting, but to have civic participation and to feel it, incumbent on us as individuals to make the democracy work, which is something that Spencer Cox echoed. The governor of Utah said, it's not up to us, or it's not up to us as, leaders, them, to turn down the temperature of things. We as individuals, as American citizens, really have to decide that this isn't who we want to be. I think the deck might be a little stacked, and I think Cox would even say that because he, advocates for a full-on social media ban for children under the age of 16. He, has brought legal action against social media companies for the damage they're doing to children. So, he has a pretty strong stance on that. Whether we as citizens can turn the temperature down while perhaps being manipulated by algorithms is an interesting question. Shapiro did bring up more specifically how leaders impact us, and he's been really outspoken about moral clarity and how leaders need to act. And he explicitly called out the president for his rhetoric.
Right. I assume that was where I was going next, is that there, of course, no conversation about this issue is complete without mentioning the president. And certainly this is an area where Shapiro and Cox had very different views on it, although they seem to do so quite civilly. I think too, what's interesting is, we've reported a lot on how Shapiro has become this spokesperson for civility and continuing to respond to these attacks with very measured comments. And in fact, I think right after what happened to his family and the firebombing in April, he tried very hard not to comment on the potential political motives behind what happened to him. So that kind of came back around a couple months ago with the Virginia district attorney's race, where the candidate that eventually won there, Jay Jones, text messages were drug out from several years ago regarding very violent and disturbing comments that he had made about the Republican House Speaker at the time. As Shapiro, again, he condemned those just as much as he condemns things that he believes Trump has said that are very, inciting violence. So there's certainly, Shapiro continues to be someone who is repeatedly asked to weigh in on these issues. But regarding how he feels about Trump, what did Cox have to say about that in response?
So Shapiro came out strong against Trump and his rhetoric, saying that he, fails the test of just leading by example and having moral clarity. I don't think Cox necessarily disagreed with the notion that the president's rhetoric is a problem, so much as he said flat out, the president would tell you this isn't his thing. Like, he wouldn't have this kind of conversation. It's not who he is. It's just not. He did say, though, that he thanked Cox for going out and speaking the way that he does. So I guess it's little bearing on whether or not the president will continue to act like the president, but there is at least the sense that he appreciates that other people don't, and he appreciates the need for other people not to, and even, I suppose, told Spencer Cox that he agrees that there should be nonviolent approaches to political differences.
Well, I wish I could say that we won't ever have to talk about this issue again, but unfortunately, acts of political violence have been something that we have dealt with for decades in this country and will likely continue to deal with. So to follow this and more, keep up with us at thecentersquare.com/Pennsylvania.